Mr. Speaker, no nation, no economy can survive without fiscal discipline. Printing more money is never the answer. Bailout funds have already been granted to Greece, Ireland, and Portugal, and the European crisis has gotten worse, not better. And here in the United States, the Obama administration has cranked up the printing presses, first through their $800 billion stimulus boondoggle, and then through the Federal Reserve's quantitative easing program. And what did it produce? 9% unemployment and a $1+ trillion budget deficit for the last 3 years, and we have $15 trillion in debt. Now I want to read from a couple of articles that were in the paper yesterday. The first one from the Wall Street Journal, and it's entitled, "Blame It on Berlin." And it says, Berlin's alleged sin is its reluctance to write a blank check to save the euro, either by underwriting a new Eurozone fiscal union or by granting permission for the European Central Bank to buy trillions of dollars in sovereign debt. And they'd have to print money to do that. The chant comes in unison from the debtor nations themselves, the bailout caucus in Brussels, an Obama White House concerned with its re-election, and liberal pundits worried about their welfare state economic model that's under assault. Like the rich in America who must pay their fair share, the Germans are supposed to pay up to save Europe. The reality is that the Germans, along with the Dutch and the Finns, are the rare Europeans who understand that saving the euro requires more than a blank check. It requires a new political commitment to better economic policy, to fiscal discipline. Now let me read from another article that was in the paper, I think it was this morning, in the Washington Post. I'll read it in part. It says, investors have grown wary of lending money to European banks. People who invest, they don't want to invest in European banks because they're worried, because they fear that their firms could lose vast amounts of money in their holdings of bonds issued by cash-short European governments. So investors don't want to invest, and Germany does not want to invest. So what happened? The world's most powerful central banks, including the United States, our Fed, are stepping in and using unlimited ability to print money and to lend it across national borders to try to arrest that dangerous cycle. The central banks are using what are called swap lines to exchange their respective currencies. And then you go on in the article and it says the swap lines pose little risk to the U.S. taxpayer. Fed officials have said, because it says little risk. They didn't say no risk, little risk. The swap lines pose little risk to the U.S. taxpayers. Federal officials have said because the Fed is doing business with foreign banks viewed as trustworthy. Those foreign central banks, in turn, take the risk of loss if the banks they're lending to go under. But it goes right back up the line. If they can't make it, then they go back to the original lender, which would be the United States Fed. Why are the Germans so reluctant to invest? Because they've been through hyperinflation. They know what it's like to have the EU Central Bank printing money. Because they remember under the Weimar Republic after World War I, people took baskets of money to go buy a loaf of bread. And why are the investors reluctant? Because they don't want to lose their money. They're afraid that they'll lose their investors' money and they might go out of business. And so what happens? The United States comes to the rescue by bailing out the central banks in Europe by saying that we're going to have a swap line with you and our currency will guarantee your currency and we'll almost charge you no interest to do that. This is an exercise in futility. That is not the answer. We should not risk the American taxpayer by giving money or lending money to Europe under these circumstances. It's crazy in my opinion. Mr. Speaker, I hope that the President and the Fed will reconsider this and not put us into the basket with the Europeans under these circumstances right now. It makes absolutely no sense, and it risks the American taxpayer.